Lightning Web Component is Salesforce's modern UI framework. When you create an LWC component, you will typically use a Salesforce UX project. The folder name must match the component base name, isExposed. This tag specifies. Hi everyone, welcome to this session on Lightning Web Components for Salesforce. Today, we are going to dive into how an LWC is organized, the folder structure, the files you will always see like HTML, JavaScript, meta file, etc. and the optional CSS file. No prior experience is required. By the end of this video, you will understand each file store and how they work together. First of all, let's start by briefly saying what an LWC is and why the file structure matters in an LWC. Lightning Web Component is Salesforce's modern UI framework built on standard web technologies, things like HTML, JavaScript modules, web components, etc. Because it uses its standards, it's a lightweight, fast, and it aligns with how web development works. Given that, when you build a component, you will find there is a single folder called a component bundle that houses all the files for that component. Having a clear structure makes component easier to maintain, reuse, test, and deploy. So let's take a look at the structure next. When you create an LWC component, you will typically use a Salesforce UX project, and under the LWC folder, you will create a folder named after your component. For example, here you can see there is a component called contact card under the LWC folder in my project. So this is a custom component that I just created for the purposes of this video. Now let's take a look at some naming rules that you will want to follow while creating a custom component. The folder name must match the component base name. Also, the folder name must begin with a lowercase letter. It should only contain alphanumeric characters or underscore. There should be no hyphens and no spaces. When you reference the component in markup, you will use kebab case. So why is this important? Because Salesforce Storing expects the naming convention to link the HTML, JavaScript, and meta file. So if you don't follow it, the component may fail to deploy or it may fail to appear. So when you are making an LWC, emphasize the folder plus file naming match. Now let's explore each of the core files in turn. Let's go through the HTML file, JavaScript file, and the metadata configuration file. Each has a specific role in your LWC component folder. The HTML file is the markup or the view of your component. Here, as you can see, the file name is contact card and it is same as the base component name. This HTML file will always begin with a template root tag that encodes your markup. Inside the HTML tag, you can use standard HTML Lightning based components like lightning button, p tags, etc. And you can also use LWC features such as curly braces bindings that map to the JavaScript file, which you can see here. Now let's go ahead and see our JavaScript file. This is where your component logic lives. The properties, the event handlers, the method, all related to your LWC component logic lives inside this file. The JavaScript file must import Lightning element from the LWC module and define a class that will extend the Lightning element like this. The JavaScript file is required for any component, even if it's a minimal component. Also, Salesforce limit the file size of a JavaScript file to be 1 megabyte. If your main JavaScript file starts getting long and contain reusable logic like calculations or string formatting, you can move that logic into a helper JavaScript file inside the same component or in a shared utility folder. You can import helper functions using relative path. You can also have multiple helper functions in one file or even multiple helper files. Helper files are not automatically loaded, so you must explicitly import what you need. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the metadata file. This file provides the configuration metadata for the component, telling Salesforce where and how the component should be used. The metadata file will have a file name starting with the LWC name itself, following with the dot and the JS meta XML. Inside the meta file, you will find tags like API version, isExposed, targets, etc. like you can see in this file. Let's take a look at what some of them does. The API version. This tag defines the Salesforce API version your component is built for. It determines which platform features, syntax, and component capabilities are available to your LWC. When Salesforce releases new version, newer API numbers unlock additional features and updates. Next is isExposed. This tag specifies whether your component is visible for use in Lightning App Builder, Experience Builder, or Flow Builder. When this is set to true, it means you can drag and drop the component onto a page. When set to false, the component can only be used internally by other components and not directly in the Builder UI. Next is the targets tag. This section tells the Salesforce where your component can appear. It lists the different placement contexts supported. For example, whether the component can be used on record pages, app pages, home pages, community pages, or flows. Each target corresponds to a specific part of the Lightning platform where the component is allowed to be added. If you don't set isExposed to true or you don't specify value target, your component may not show up in the Lightning app builder. There are other tags like target configs or capabilities which are more advanced and will be covering in future videos. Also, this meta file doesn't contain UI or logic. It controls where the component can be used and how it's registered in Salesforce. Now, beyond the three core files, you may optionally include a CSS file if you want custom styling for your component. As you can see, I haven't created a CSS file yet. I'm going to create a CSS file. It will be the same name as the component name followed by the CSS extension for the file. This file is only needed if you want to override styles or apply component specific styling. If you omit this file, the component will rely on default styling and base components. Styles defined in the CSS files are scoped to the component. They won't leak into other components because of Shadow DOM and component isolation. So think of the CSS file like your component's outfit. It is optional, but if you want it to look special, then you can use this. In an LWC, you cannot have multiple CSS files inside a single component folder, meaning you can only have one CSS file per component. However, you can achieve reusable or extended styling in two main ways. Option 1 is to have a shared styles folder, as you can see on the screen, and then importing it into the component that you need extra styling. This will let you have a base style filter that multiple components can reuse. Option 2 is to use an external static resource. If you have a full design system or third-party style sheet like a custom font or brand color scheme, upload it as a static resource and include it in your component using load style from Lightning or platform resource loader. If you want me to dive deeper into any of these options, please let me know via comments. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some code snippet and see all of this in action. Here in the HTML file, you can see we are using name, title and email variables which are bound to the JavaScript properties. When user clicks on this button, the handle click method will run, and the handle click method is written inside our JavaScript file, and it will show a message generated dynamically from the JavaScript, and it will be displayed in the HTML via the greetings message variable. Inside our JavaScript file, we define reactive fields like name, title, email, greeting message, and we have also defined our handle click method which will update the greetings message. Because this property is used in the template, the change is reflected instantly. Let's also quickly take a look at our meta file. Here, the component uses latest API version which is 65. It is exposed in the app builder, so you can drag it onto any Lightning page and it can appear in app, record and home pages. Also, in the CSS files, I have added a Salesforce blue color and spacing to the greeting text. I have already deployed this code into my org. Let's go ahead and try it out. So in here, as you can see, I have opened one of the accounts page, and for demo purposes, I'm going to edit this page and add our custom component into this. Let's go ahead and edit the page and look for our contact card. So here is our contact card, and let's go ahead and drag and drop into our accounts page and click on save. And let's go back, and as you can see, our contact card is successfully added into the accounts page. Let's click on the button which says say hello. As you can see, our code is working. Now when the component loads, it will display the contact details, and on clicking the button, it will display the greetings message instantly, which is a good demonstration of how HTML, JavaScript and meta file along with our CSS file is working all together in one Lightning Web Component bundle. Now let's walk through some of the frequently asked beginner questions and key concerns. One of the major concerns is that if I always need a CSS file, and the answer no. At minimum, you need HTML and JavaScript file plus the meta file. A CSS file is optional if you don't need custom styles. Next, what will happen if the folder and file name doesn't match? In this scenario, the tooling may fail to deploy or the component may not be recognized properly. So always keep the base name consistent. Next, what is a template tag in an HTML file? It is the root container for the markup in an LWC UI component. Without it, the component won't compile correctly. Why do I need the meta XML file? Because Salesforce needs to know how to expose your component, where it can be used, which page and other configuration. Without it, the component may not appear in the builder or in your app. Now, some of you guys can also wonder if you can share the JavaScript or CSS across components. And the answer is yes. You can use helper.js modules or shared CSS modules, but that's an intermediate or advanced feature. For beginners, we will just focus on components bundles first. Now, let's go ahead and see some of the best practices as a beginner. Give your component a clear descriptive name like account card or my contact list rather than generic names like component one. Keep folders and file name consistent and lowercase in the beginning. Keep each component folder self-contained. All the files for that component should go in there. When you add more logic, consider you need to refactor JS file into helper files. For CSS files, use it when you need custom styling. Don't overstyle for now. Just keep it simple. Preview your component. After deploying it to your org, go to your Lightning app builder and drop it on a page. If it doesn't appear, check your isExposed or targets in your meta file. To summarize, an LWC component one bundle consists of a folder that holds the HTML file, the JavaScript file, and the meta file, and optionally a CSS file. Understanding how these parts fit together is key to building components that work cleanly in Salesforce. For your next step, try creating your first component in your Scratch or org or developer org. Name it something simple and add the core files, deploy it, and drag it into an app page and see it live. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, give it a like, comment with the questions, and share with friends learning Salesforce development. Thank you.